Today, we're going to dive into a massive shift in how we build our most complicated machines. And this story, it doesn't start with a picture-perfect launch. No, it starts with the devastating cost of getting things wrong, and how that opened the door to a radical new way of thinking.
You know, in aerospace, failure isn't just a setback. It's a brutal, unforgiving reality. When you've got machines with hundreds of people on board, flying miles above the ground, a single tiny flaw, one little breakdown in the system, can have consequences that are just catastrophic.
And this is what that looks like. In the span of just 5 months, 2 brand new Boeing 737 MAX jets literally fell out of the sky. First, Lion Air Flight 610. Then Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. In total, 346 people lost their lives. The world's best-selling airplane was grounded everywhere, and the entire industry was just shaken to its absolute core.
So what happened? Well, at the center of it all was a piece of software called MCAS. Now, here's the irony. It was meant to be a safety feature, but a single faulty sensor could trick it, forcing the plane's nose down again and again and again, literally fighting the pilots for control until the very end.
So, you're probably wondering, how does a tragedy like this have anything to do with building rockets? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. We'll start with this tale of 2 failures, then pivot to what we're calling the SpaceX algorithm. We'll look at the hard numbers, the whole dilemma around reusability, why Europe chose a different path, and finally, what this new aerospace playbook actually looks like.
All right, let's start by digging into that traditional aerospace culture, the old way, where the obsession with avoiding failure at all costs can, paradoxically, lead to the biggest failures of all.
And here's the really chilling part. The problem wasn't just some technical glitch nobody saw coming. No, the flaw wasn't a secret. It was a known issue, talked about internally. This points to a complete breakdown in the system, a culture that incentivized burying problems instead of flagging them and fixing them. It was a failure of process just as much as it was a failure of software.
Okay, now let's do a complete 180. Let's pivot to a totally different approach. One that doesn't just put up with failure, but actually welcomes it, uses it as a tool for getting better. This is it. This is the question that really separates the old way from the new. What if, instead of designing everything to avoid failure, you design everything to learn from failure? You invite it in, you study it, and you use it to build something better and way, way faster.
This quote from Elon Musk just gets right to the heart of the SpaceX philosophy. In their world, failure isn't a catastrophe you hide from. It's a data point, a rapid, unscheduled disassembly, as they kind of jokingly call an explosion, isn't a disaster. It's a deliberate experiment. You push the machine past its limits specifically to see where it breaks.
And this isn't just some vague motto on a poster. They've actually formalized it into a 5-step process they call the algorithm. It's this constant loop. It starts by questioning everything, even the original requirements. Then, they design the absolute simplest thing that could possibly work. Crucially, the engineers are on the factory floor with the technicians, building it together so the feedback is instant. Then they test it till it breaks. They expect it to break. And then they take all that real-world data and immediately use it to make the next version better. And the whole cycle starts over, sometimes in a matter of weeks, not years. So that's the philosophy. What does this aggressive, failure-embracing approach actually look like when you look at the results? Well, honestly, the numbers are just staggering.
I mean, just look at the sheer scale of the difference here. We are not talking about small, incremental improvements. Traditional aerospace works on timelines of years. SpaceX works in months. Big decisions that would take a year of meetings and reviews in the old system can happen in a single afternoon at SpaceX. We're talking about a design cycle that's 12 times faster and a decision timeline that's up to 100 times faster. It's just a different league.
And that speed translates directly into time and money. I mean, look at this comparison. You've got NASA's Space Launch System, an incredible rocket, but developed in the traditional way, against Starship. SpaceX developed its massive rocket 62% faster and for a tiny fraction of the cost. It is a completely different paradigm for building things.
And the most famous result of this whole process? Reusability. By trying, failing, and trying again at incredible speed, SpaceX cracked the code on booster recovery. This number? That's the cost reduction you get with a Falcon 9 launch compared to a traditional single-use rocket. It completely changed the economics of space. It's a total game changer.
So, with results like these, you have to be asking yourself, why hasn't the entire industry just ripped a page from this playbook, right? Well, the answer is actually way more complicated than you might think.
So here's the catch. Reusability is only cheap if you fly a lot. And I mean a lot. In 2023, nearly 70% of all SpaceX launches were for their own project, the Starlink satellite constellation. You see, they didn't just build a reusable rocket. They created their own massive internal customer to make it profitable from day one.
And that brings us to Europe. They looked at the exact same problem, how to build a next-gen rocket, and they came to a very different, and for their situation, a very logical conclusion.
A quick look at the numbers shows that Europe's Ariane 6 is a seriously powerful and competitive rocket. In fact, for the really high-value geostationary orbit, or GEO market, which is where Europe has always been a major player, it can actually lift more than a Falcon 9 can. They made a smart business decision. They optimized their rocket for the market they already had, not a theoretical future one they might not.
And it's really important to remember that reusability isn't just a switch you can flip. It is a massive, incredibly difficult engineering challenge. There are tons of different ways to approach it, and every single one is unbelievably complex. It requires a huge long-term investment. And for Europe, without that guaranteed fire hose of launches like Starlink, it just didn't make sense to bet the farm on it.
Okay, so what have we learned here? Let's try to pull all this together and really lay out the core principles of this new aerospace playbook.
So this new model really seems to be built on 4 pillars. First, vertical integration. You have your engineers and your welders working side by side on the factory floor, which makes the feedback loop super tight. Second, smart risk management. You stop over-engineering everything and only add strength and complexity where the data tells you you have to. Third, rapid iteration. You treat every single thing you build as a learning experiment, not a precious final product. And finally, data-driven learning. The flight data from yesterday's test literally becomes a new part on tomorrow's rocket.
But, and this is a really big but, this playbook is not a silver bullet. The whole move fast and break things idea runs headfirst into the slow, careful world of safety regulators. It takes a ton of upfront money to even get started. And most importantly, that fail fast mentality, well, that has to be balanced very, very carefully when you start putting people's lives on the line.
And that brings us right back full circle to where we started. The old way led to a catastrophe born from a fear of admitting something was wrong. The new way embraces failure and learns from it. So the question for the 21st century is this: has SpaceX truly written a new, better, safer blueprint for innovation? Or have they just created a faster path to a totally different kind of catastrophe that we just haven't seen yet? The answer is going to define the future of how we reach for the stars.